This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Mike Sedita.
Hello out there. Welcome to episode 121 of the Good Neighbor Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sedita. And today we're joined by, I'm a little bit nervous about today's interview because we're joined by Dr. Jamie Winderbaum Fernandez, who is the founder, doctor, owner of Interventional Psychiatry of Tampa Bay. Do you go by Dr. Jamie, Dr. Fernandez? What would you want me to call you during this podcast?
Dr. Fernandez works just fine.
Perfect. Dr. Fernandez, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little cold. It's a little cold outside. We're recording today in December, so it's a little chilly here in Florida, but I sound like a big baby since I'm from the Northeast. I should probably be used to this, but I am just not anymore. I'm not built for this temperature of 50 degrees or whatever it is. It sounds silly to even say.
I hear you. No, I'm a former New Yorker, and I completely understand.
The blood thins out quick. I'm not a doctor, but I do know the blood thins out pretty quick when you're down here for a little while. So just so you know what we do with the Good Neighbor Podcast, how we got started, and you know what it's all about is, back during COVID in 2020, the Good Neighbor Podcast was established in Southwest Florida as a way for businesses, people in the community who had something going on to be able to communicate that to the community and other business owners when we all had to be socially distant. And over the past 3+ almost 4 years since COVID, the Good Neighbor Podcast has developed into a national brand. We have podcasts in Colorado, Atlanta, Virginia, all over the country. I'm fortunate enough to be the person here in Tampa that gets to talk to business owners and professionals like you. And with that being said, tell us a little bit about Interventional Psychiatry of Tampa Bay.
So we started out as a practice where I saw patients, and we also provided some interventional care for more complicated forms of, say, depression. And gradually we started doing clinical trials, which is, what typically is thought of as, you come in, you enroll if, say, you have depression that's not responding to standard medication, and you might get a placebo, you might get a medication. I don't know what you're getting. The person coming in doesn't know what they're getting, so we can collect accurate data as far as whether or not that medication works. And this is how new medications come to market. And
that's considered like a double-blind.
Correct. Double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized, prospective clinical trial. Really the standard of care when we're trying to decide if a medication that's in development actually works.
So let me ask you this. And how long's it been since you went from I'm air quoting here, traditionally seeing patients in like an office form to being more on the clinical side? When did that switch over?
Just to kind of give you a little bit of history about myself, I spent 15 years as a hospitalist. So most of my career has been spent seeing patients who have pretty significant illness in the hospital setting. And I was also a researcher, but started out doing a bit more kind of basic science research. So what you picture taking place in a lab. And as my career kind of grew, I started my own practice a couple years ago. We were seeing outpatients. We provide, like I said, interventional therapies and kind of things that you try when standard medications aren't working, as well as they could be. And then we started integrating trials, so giving patients that option to enroll in clinical trials as well. And at this point, that's the large majority of my practice.
Okay.
I would say probably 95% of the practice is having patients come in, see if they qualify for a study, and getting them enrolled, getting them started, and following them for as long as the study provides. We're able to follow them for.
So a couple of questions off of that. I'll get back into a little bit more in your background in a second, but in the time you've been doing this, so is the timeline of how this works, a drug company, insert drug company X, Y, or Z, whoever you want to use, develops a drug in their R&D department, and then it reaches a certain level, and now it's ready for, trials. And then does it come to you? Like, do you have to do any kind of special, do you have any special relationship with a drug company, or is it from like the AMA or something, or the American Psychiatry?
The relationship is with the company that's making the medication, testing the medication specifically. So there's a whole breadth of ones that you've heard of. Sponsors like Novartis, like Johnson & Johnson,
right?
Folks along those lines, and then smaller ones that you haven't heard of that are doing more innovative things. Sometimes it's on site, and then we do some decentralized trials also, meaning that patients can stay in their home and it's all virtually done and they go to local labs. So, there's a largely, because of COVID, but because of just how the field itself is moving, there's a big spectrum of the way we can deliver care and who we work with. The other thing is that there are some trials, like I said, which are kind of larger. There's a lot of sites doing them. There's thousands of people being enrolled. Once we kind of know that the medication is, safe and at what dose, but we do earlier phase clinical trials too that might be a little bit more innovative, different delivery methods, different ways of working. Your phase 1, your phase 2 trials as opposed to your phase 3. And then we even have some that are considered even open, observational studies, phase 4, open label trials where, patients know they're getting the medication. They're just simply coming into the study, coming into the clinic to get the medication and then being followed over time so that the company can continue to collect safety data even after the medication's been approved by the FDA.
So you there's a couple questions off of that. You said a whole bunch in there. So first, for people listening to this, can you just go into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4? Like if you said to me AA, AAA, and the majors, I know what you're talking about in the progression. Phase 1 through phase 4, is phase 4 further along or in the beginning stages? How does that work?
So phase 4 is further along. I mean, that's typically we're just we know it's working. We're just collecting longer term safety data, and typically there's no placebo. Patients know that they're getting the medication
being administered,
and we're just making sure that over time, because initially when a medication comes to market, there's some good data behind it, but we like to for example, there are medications that have been on the market now for years, and the company's releasing 4 years of open label safety data. So we know
as a drug goes further and further out, right? Now you have a 5-year scope of data versus the longer a drug's on the market, obviously, the longer you have research that shows the results of it. But the next question I had for you along that line, from a chronological standpoint, all right, it's phase 4. You guys have been testing it. You're monitoring somebody. How difficult is it to get it from phase 4 or whatever's beyond that to where the FDA actually approves it? Like,
so I think
that seems like it's an arduous process.
It's extremely difficult. So to give you a sense, from those medications that start as an idea and a molecule in the R&D department, like you said, 90% will never come to market. So, it is obviously a difficult and rigorous, rightfully so, process to get a medication to market. So kind of going back in the chronology, it starts early phase 1. And a lot of times that's just, after something's been tested in, often cells, then animals, then, they get tested in humans. The first people who it's tested in are typically healthy, because you're just trying to make sure that it's safe. And those are your real kind of early phase 1 trials. It involves usually a lot of data collection to see also how, when you take a medication, it distributes in the body, depending if it's a pill, if it's an injection, if it's a patch. Then phase 2, kind of smaller studies. Maybe they're looking to recruit, say, somewhere in the area of 50 to 100 patients worldwide. And they're still looking mostly at safety, but they also start looking a little bit at effectiveness as well. And then once, those things have been shown, and the data shows, some sort of statistical significance, that's kind of how we judge things, then it could go to a phase 3. And that's your larger trial that you're looking to recruit thousands of patients then. And you're still looking at safety, but really that's when you start looking at efficacy. Does the medication separate from placebo when you compare the results of patients side by side? And that's why it's so important they be double blind. So that you're not biasing either, someone like myself, who's the principal investigator, or the patient.
Right. So I guess getting now into a little bit more of your background specifically, when I think of psychiatry, I think of, and again, I'm a novice. Like I'm just a podcaster and marketing person. So this is way above my pay grade. But I think of like a person sitting in a chair, but it's not just a psychologist, but a psychiatrist who can sit down and kind of delve into their thinking and their behaviors and some of that stuff at a psychiatry level that way, that can actually prescribe medication. And that may be completely wrong, but from your background, it seems like, from what I'm hearing, like you went into this, but you were more like a lab, like a lab rat type. You like to be in the lab. You like the chemistry. You like the math. You like doing the numbers and figuring out the science of it more than the practical side of it. Is that a fair assessment?
A nerd, Mike. You can say it.
I didn't want to say it. I mean, because then it looks like, I'm, picking on the nerdy science doctor lady, and I don't want to do that. But yeah, so you're a science nerd. Like, you love that.
That's how this all started. I did start out in molecular biology research, but throughout medical school became really aware that there's a tangible human outcome to the science that's done at the bench side. And I got more interested in neuroscience. And then when I was doing my clinical rotations in med school, it was you're looking at neurology or looking at psychiatry, but I really enjoy the interaction with people. And no matter how much you try to distill a field like psychiatry down to the science, which still fundamentally is what separates folks from who have mental illness from folks who don't.
Right. An imbalance somewhere.
You got to enjoy dealing with people and getting to know their story and getting to know their motivations and how things are different when they're sick. So I think it's a combination of all of those. But you are right in saying that I'm not kind of the picture of a psychiatrist who you come and see in the office and you try to process your past, and I prescribe medications. I really have a lot of devotion to trying to move the field ahead in many ways where we still lag behind other fields in medicine, because these are real treatable illnesses. And I think sometimes the tragedy is that we don't acknowledge that they should have parity, that they should be kind of held side by side with other medical illnesses we treat. So, that's kind of, where the science part comes in.
But the thing, and the other type of doctor, which clearly you're not, is a surgeon who have zero bedside manner. They just want to cut you and do it. I mean, that's the other type of doctor. And clearly that's not the case with you. The question, again, I have a couple other questions though, but as a little girl, were you like playing with like a chemistry set, like blowing stuff up? Is that your Christmas present? You weren't playing with dolls and trying to operate on them. You were like trying to blow things up in your parents' living room. I mean, is that what you were doing?
I think I was a little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
But no, I always wanted to be a doctor. I always wanted to be. It is great. I mean, what I love so much about the old cliche of, I wanted to help people. I mean, you really get to do that in psychiatry, and you also get to deal with a population of patients who often needs good representation. They're disenfranchised. No one's, look, it's great that we have these organizations that back patients with other illnesses, but often with mental health, the happily ever after story is having nobody ever know you were mentally ill. And so my folks don't walk around with pink ribbons on.
Right. Hold up a sign.
I get that. But then, you're left to believe that the only mental illness out there is untreatable, which it's not. So many people struggle and so many people get treatment. And then there's still so much more we can do to get people adequate treatment. So, whether it's the clinic setting or the hospital setting, or, trials that will bring new drugs, both mechanistically and delivery method, to market and treat these illnesses. I mean, that's kind of, what my career path has been.
Well, it's so crazy how far things come. So like a book I read probably a year ago or a year and a half ago called Empire of Pain. It's about the Sackler family. It's about, a lot of the opioid crisis. But Arthur Sackler, who was the patriarch of that family, he was doing lobotomies. Like, I mean, that was psychiatric treatment, right? In the 40s and 50s, whatever it was. So for it to come from that to him creating Valium, which is like a lobotomy, a pill form of a lobotomy, to the way we treat mental illness now, it isn't really that long of a time frame 80 years to go from where we were to where we are now. I mean, as you're going through this in medical school and learning about some of the history through it, does it blow your mind like you're on the cutting edge of what's going to be the next thing that could totally turn around this, maybe eradicate this illness at some point if we find the right combination for the right body chemistry?
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea that, probably my lifetime would be the beginning of what will be the actual advancements in neuroscience and the ability to treat neuropsychiatric illness was incredibly exciting. The brain, I would argue, it is the most important organ and also the most complicated. And so we have, lagged both insofar as what we've lacked in terms of technology to really kind of understand it, technology to diagnose brain disease, and that, is psychiatric illness. That can be things like Alzheimer's. And then just the, clinical skills that we need to, be able to identify and guide patients through treatment whose mind is literally playing tricks on them. So, it's a very complicated process to kind of build the trust and the, and then have the expertise to treat all together.
It always, pun intended, it blows my mind that, I guess the saying is, like, we as humans, our brains, we only use a fraction of the capacity for what our brain is capable of actually doing. And then I see this thing again, I go back to some modern stuff, but Netflix did this series on these NFL players, and one of the guys has this thing on his head that's stimulating his neurons for his rapid response treatment or whatever, like the things we do. And I watch it and go, are we sure that that's really something that is accurately working? Like, how, like, this guy's looks like he's got a CPAP machine on his skull that's just tweaking his brain. And you're like, is that right? Or is he in another 5 years going to have CTE from that instead of from getting hit in the head? It's crazy.
Well, we know brain stimulation works.
Okay, good. Perfect answer.
Much, right? Because we have things like transcranial magnetic stimulation. We have electroconvulsive therapy. And those modalities, I mean, TMS has been around for a while. Electroconvulsive therapy has been around for a long time. Both of them work. There's also, other brain stimulation techniques, vagal nerve stimulation, deep brain stimulation. And we also know from animal models, a little bit about why they work, that it releases growth factors, that it allows for a brain that's really been, in some ways deadened by, say, chronic depression over time to change, it promotes new neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. It allows neurons to kind of reconnect. Whereas, in the context of chronic neuropsychiatric illness, they start to kind of deaden away.
So, but stuff like that, like, okay, so that's someone that has some like clinical depression that maybe that can almost kind of bring the elasticity of their brain back into it, like get it fired up again. But someone like my dad passed away recently. He had Alzheimer's, he had dementia. Excuse me. He once it gets to a certain point, right, there's no way to kind of come back. There's a point of no return, correct?
Right. And I think part of the problem, with Alzheimer's, which will remain a problem until it doesn't anymore, is that we're just simply, not able to diagnose it early enough where we can really intervene. That said, there are some exciting things on the horizon. We have an Alzheimer's trial here now with a brand new compound that, has not been used for any length of time. There's new biologics available for Alzheimer's that may be able to change the trajectory. But sometimes with neurodegenerative disease, where we're falling short is diagnosis at the appropriate time, where you can actually enact change in whatever the disease pathogenesis is.
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't in a clinical study. I just lived it, taking care of him. In the beginning, we just thought it was like selective memory, like the stuff he didn't want to remember to do, like taking out the garbage, like things like that. You just thought he was kind of playing around. But I will tell you, there was one drug, and I'm probably butchering the name. It was called like memantine or memetine. I don't know what it was, but I administered all his medication for years. And at one point, I don't know how it happened, that drug we didn't get it, the prescription refilled. So he went like a week and a half without it. And I could tell you whether it was just a bad run or what it was, but his whole outlook had totally changed from being off that drug for a week. And then once he got back on it, whatever the loading dose of period of time was, he was back to his normal forgetful self, but not like frantic and like all over. So there is clearly stuff out there.
There is that can help slow progression.
Yeah.
Which I think is, what you're talking about, memantine, Namenda, donepezil, Aricept. There are
right.
things that can slow progression. But, really the holy grail is being able to find a real treatment, if not a cure.
So, we've talked a lot about, and I've kind of brought up some of them, though, like misconceptions about what you do. I mean, I've already brought up a couple. Is there another one that kind of jumps out at you? Like something where, a myth that someone thinks when they're coming in to see you, or they think you're going to have some cure or whatever, where you have to almost kind of like educate them. A lot of what you do is education, but where people are just off in their thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the misconceptions, like I said earlier, is that these aren't treatable illnesses. And so often they are. And our goal now is remission, meaning no more symptoms, not just simply a response. I think as far as clinical trials go, sometimes the misconception is that they're too good to be true, that, we're able to offer free care, we're able to compensate patients for the time they spend with us. They get medications provided, and often we can provide transportation too, so they can get back and forth to the site. There's been over time sometimes less than positive history with clinical trials. Now it's highly regulated to make sure those things don't happen, but some of that mistrust also runs deep, particularly in certain communities. So, not only, like you said, is one of our goals education, but being able to provide this resource and really being able to diversify the folks who enroll in clinical trials. Because
that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah,
that was my next question.
It's great to get a lot of data, but if you're only getting data on a very specific population of patients, then you're really only learning how the particular pharmaceutical works in that subset of people.
Right.
So one of the goals in our clinic has been to expand it so that we're getting a very diverse, inclusive mix of patients into trials. So we get some real world data and can figure out how these medications are going to affect everyone if and when they come to market.
Yeah, I would think that's probably the biggest thing. And then getting enough of those people, right? Like you're having like, one Indian person and then one mom who's 36 and white. You need a group of those people to be able to actually accumulate data. Because like you said earlier, it's data points. It's collecting data and enough to get a scientific, I don't know, whatever trend, so that you could see that this would work in that group or it won't work in that group.
Right. You need a certain size. You need a certain number of patients enrolled so you can actually look at the statistical significance between patients who got the medication and patients who didn't.
Gotcha.
And that's certainly the goal when we're talking about phase 3 trials, because the more people you enroll, the more significant the data you get has the potential of being. And so, that's probably, one of the biggest misconceptions. And so really, what I hope is that, folks will just, come in, be educated by the trials or give us a call because, I used to do other procedures like electroconvulsive therapy in psychiatry that, work. And often save people's lives and work when nothing else will.
Right.
But, the long time stigma and negative perception to those, sometimes has to be discussed. And what I would say with, anyone who's apprehensive about, anywhere from seeing a psychiatrist for the first time because you're feeling depressed to, looking to enroll in a clinical trial because, you have something that hasn't been treated and maybe hasn't been well diagnosed, come through the door, give us a call. You'll see that it really, it's not so scary. We'll take really good care of you and, hopefully kind of together be able to destigmatize, which, illnesses which are very prevalent. But, for a long time, I've had people kind of just living in the shadows with them and suffering more than they have to.
So the question I have off of all that is, so you talk about like people coming in and they have transportation and all this stuff. I'm assuming, and again, might be my misconception. I'm assuming the drug company has so much money invested in stage 3, 4, when it gets to that level, that they're investing this money. That's part of their R&D budget to have a clinic like yours to be able to do this, correct?
Correct. We serve basically as subcontractors for
Gotcha.
pharmaceutical companies who, want to get enough data to bring these medications to market. If they show that they're safe and effective. And so, we really do, we run, a site that's going to ensure that they have usable and, honest data.
Accurate data.
The answer to the FDA, but, in every case, one of the nice things is being able to kind of control the environment and make sure that, we're getting good, accurate data from a diverse group of patients.
So then the big question I have is, when you go from like stage 3 to stage 4, do you guys have like a party with a cake and balloons come out of the ceiling, or is there anything like that? Or is it just kind of like, all right, on to stage 4?
No, I mean, there's absolutely reason to celebrate when new therapeutics become available, right. Particularly new mechanisms and new delivery methods. So, I mean, I don't know if my party looks like your party, Mike, but I do.
Listen, if there's cake involved, I'm in.
There are some really cool things, coming out. I can't speak too specifically, but in terms of stuff on the horizon, we just finished a phase 2. I don't know who got what. So, it's hard not to let your mind play tricks on you.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So if it's double blind, if I'm getting a placebo, because there is the placebo effect truly is a thing. There are people that think they're, right?
It's one of our biggest problems in psychiatry. And all
that was going to be my next question.
The medications that really were effective not coming to market.
Because everybody's like, oh my God, I feel fantastic. And all they got was like Flintstones tablets or Flintstones chewables or whatever it was.
Saline.
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right. So enough with the nerdy stuff. What do you do when you're not in the clinic? What do you do for fun? Clearly, you don't ride a motorcycle without a helmet or go skydiving. You probably have some safer, like, do you knit? Are you a knitter, or do you do anything like, what kind of nerdy stuff do you do in for fun, or do you do dangerous stuff for fun?
I definitely don't do dangerous stuff for fun, but I'm also not a knitter. I think I live somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. My main hobby, aside from my 3 lovely boys, is I chair the board of trustees at the Tampa Museum of Art.
Gotcha.
So trying to really kind of make that resource accessible to the community.
Yeah.
And, I love what we do there, both in terms of the art we show, but also the amount of community outreach we do to kids, everywhere. I mean, up in Pasco County and beyond that otherwise wouldn't be exposed to art because public funding is.
So how old are your kids? How old are your boys?
I have 16-year-old twins and I have a 7-year-old.
Okay, so you're telling me the thing you do for fun is serve as a board trustee at an art museum?
Yes.
All right, I'm just checking. I wanted to make sure I understood that completely. I mean, do the kids do any? I mean, are the kids involved in any kind of sports or cheerleading or any? Like probably the chess club. I would think possibly, right?
No, I got 2 lacrosse goalies.
All right, just checking.
And I'm an artist.
So you're a lacrosse mom. So when you're out there watching lacrosse, I mean, are you like hooting and hollering, yelling at the officials and stuff? Or are you just kind of like golf clapping when something nice happens?
First and foremost, I'm hoping nobody gets injured.
Of course.
And then I'm always rooting for them to win.
All right. And this is my other fun question. I need to ask this question. Have you ever been somewhere where something happens and someone yells, "Is there a doctor here?" And then you step out and go, "I'm a doctor," and help them? Has that ever happened?
I don't know that I have ever been, the less than satisfying answer is I don't know if I've ever been in that situation.
Oh, Doc. But all right, it was worth the shot. So, all right. One of the questions I always like to ask people is, a time in your life when you ran into like a challenge or a hardship where you didn't know, like whether it was like studying for your boards. I mean, you were probably really smart. You probably like read the book once and were like, all right, give me 100. But was there a time in your life when you ran into something where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to get through this, and somehow turned it around to come out the other side to be where you're at right now?
Well, I mean, I think, there's a lot of kind of challenges as you go through your career, especially a career in medicine. And it's changed so many times for me. Like I said, I really started out as a bench researcher, not sure if I was going to go to med school or get a PhD. And, I think as you kind of move along, as you get to exposed to more things, you're somewhat flexible in your thinking and what interests you and where you want to go next. So, middle of med school, I decided to go to National Institutes of Health, do some research, see if that was still where I wanted to be. During that time, my view of the field changed completely. And that was when I started to get interested in neuroscience, psychiatry, came back, decided to be to go into psychiatry, and then wanted a more biomedical training. So I moved out to the West Coast from New York for a while.
Where in New York?
I grew up in Rockland County.
In Rockland County.
Right over the Hudson from Westchester.
Okay, yeah, all right. So like not up near Nyack, up that way, like a little north Nyack.
Nyack. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Very familiar, very, very familiar. So let me ask you this. The one thing, if people are listening to this, I mean, clearly your background is diverse. You've been involved in so many different things in the medical field, and you've landed here. So it's your expertise. You were always a nerd. We've established that. But what is the one thing you want people to know? That is it, look, you can get help, and through our clinical trials that you'll be able to get it and not have to pay for it? I mean, what's the big thing?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good takeaway. I mean, I think, across the board, what I really do try to promote is understanding of mental illness, of those who struggle, the incredible prevalence of it, and the fact that so many times these illnesses are treatable. And so get help, even if that doesn't, even if you don't feel comfortable starting with the psychiatrist. If you feel like there's something going on, talk to your primary care doctor. If you're seeing your GYN annually as a woman, talk to her or him. But make sure you get help, because so many of these illnesses are treatable, and the big tragedy is when they go untreated because the stigma still prevents people from getting care.
Yeah.
As far as clinical trials go, I mean, this is a resource, as you aptly pointed out. There's certainly our sponsors, the pharmaceutical companies know that there's great benefit for them in bringing medications to market. However, all of that said, in the meantime, the clinical trials provides a safe setting where you can get compensated care. We can, like I said, provide transportation, and you get, a lot of really close follow-up while you're enrolled in the study. And the other nice thing, from the practical standpoint that buys you is I've been a psychiatrist in this area for 15 years, and it's hard to get in to see a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
You want to use insurance, they might not take insurance, even if you want to pay out of pocket.
You're booked 3 months out.
Exactly. The wait lists are extraordinary.
Right.
So, you call us, say, hey, I have depression. Is there a trial I might qualify for? You could get enrolled in a trial that doesn't, even have an investigational product. It's simply just to monitor over time, or something that might be an earlier phase, or anywhere in between. But, we have 5 ongoing trials in depression right now. So call us, and we could probably find one that's appropriate that you're also comfortable enrolling in. And in the meantime, not only does that get you all of the benefits the trial can afford, but it buys you some time. So, hey, take that appointment for, I don't know, September 2025.
Right. It's like a bridge.
Right. But in the meantime, you'll be in our clinic, and we'll be providing you care, and you'll be seeing me and my wonderful team. And, it at least buys you some time until you can get in to see someone at the close of the study.
So as we wrap this up, what is the best way for people to get a hold of you? Phone number, where are you guys located? Where is your clinic actually physically at?
We are in South Tampa on the intersection of Dale Mabry and Neptune. So kind of right in the heart of South Tampa. So we're pretty easy to get to. And you can go to our website, interventionalpsychiatrytv.com. And when you go there, you can also just fill out your name, contact information on a form, and we can reach out to you, or a number or address is listed. We can be found at 813-251-1800. Or, and like I said, just come to the website and enter your contact information, and we can reach out to you.
You don't have a TikTok page? Come on, Doc. It's 2023.
I have a TikTok page. I believe that we have a Instagram and a LinkedIn and a Facebook page.
So, folks, if you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, you know what, look, something is just off with me. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure what it is, but I don't know who to talk to. You can call 813-251-1800. Get a hold of Interventional Psychiatry of Tampa Bay. We're going to put all the information in the post when we load this up. But contact Dr. Fernandez, her team. They will give you guided care through the process to get you started on your journey back to feeling better. Dr. Fernandez, thank you so much for being a good neighbor, and thank you so much for being on the Good Neighbor podcast. You have an amazing holiday.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and you have an amazing holiday as well.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Passcode. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnppasco.com. That's gnppasco.com, or call 813-922-3610.